Greetings, Bentley alumni, family, and friends. Thank you again for joining us for today's virtual event. I'm Emily Williams, Director of Alumni and Family Engagement. This is our final of our January series that we've done for New Year, New You. So we hope you've all been working on your New Year's resolutions or your goals for 2021. And before we get started, as always, I do have some light housekeeping. After this session, we'll be sending out an email with a recording of today's session, as well as a survey to gather your feedback, as well as a listing of our upcoming virtual events. So keep an eye on your inboxes. Thank you to those of you who submitted questions in advance. Prithvi will address several of the pre-submitted questions on this webinar. If you have a question arise as you're listening, go ahead and put it into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and it will be considered for response during the question and answer session after the presentation. Lastly, if you need technical assistance, please use the chat box to speak with us directly. My colleague Bethany will be responding to your questions as best she can. And now today's featured speaker is Prithvi Kudva, MSHFID candidate for the class of 2021. Prithvi is a research associate at the User Experience Center at Bentley. Prior to joining the UXC, she worked as a UX researcher at Lollipop UX UI Design Studio, where she planned and conducted user research studies for clients across domains. She also has experience working with Adobe as a consultant in quality assurance. Prithvi holds a Bachelor of Engineering degree from BMS College of Engineering, where she majored in Information Science and Engineering, and a Master of Design degree from National Institute of Design, Bangalore, where she majored in Interaction Design. She is currently, as I mentioned, pursuing her Master of Science in Human Factors and Information Design at Bentley. Without further ado, please join me in virtually welcoming Prithvi. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Emily, for that wonderful introduction. And hello, everyone. I'm really excited to share my thoughts on how we can happily unplug. I hope you find this session interesting and useful. In today's session, I'm going to first talk about why we should unplug from technology and then give a quick summary on what gets us hooked, exactly what is it about technology that makes us so addicted to it. And then I'm going to give some tips and strategies on how we can unplug. And here I'm going to cover both unplugging from the distracting technology like social media, as well as how we can unplug from work at the end of the day during these trying times of remote working. And at the end, I'm going to try to answer as many questions as I can. Before I dive into the topic, let me tell you a bit about myself and what got me interested in this topic. So, as Emily mentioned, I'm currently in my final semester at the HFID program, and my areas of interest are designing for healthcare and designing for social impact. So, while I was in the HFID program's first semester during spring, I found myself getting pretty overwhelmed by all the homework and the assignments I had overdue, but somehow I found myself still scrolling through Instagram. I stumbled across the activity tab on my Instagram app, and I was really shocked to see that I was spending almost 2 hours a day on Instagram. And it's funny because I do not even remember having that much free time during the day. And these were days when I skipped working out or I skipped cooking and ordered takeout just because I thought I don't really have time for anything apart from my assignments. I then went into my phone settings and I looked at my dashboard, and that was just as shocking. 6.5 hours on my phone daily, that's just too much. Clearly, I was doing something wrong, and I'm sure many of you can relate to this. In 2020, the average time spent using the internet was 6 hours and 42 minutes. And almost around half of that time was spent using mobile devices. And 50% of the time using mobile was spent on social media and communication apps. And 21% was spent on video and entertainment apps. Um, so I was working as a research associate at the Bentley University User Experience Center, and I see some of you over here. Thank you so much for joining. And at the UXC, I had to write an article for the UXC blog. I decided to explore this topic a bit, and I wrote an article called "Designing for Digital Wellbeing." Now, what is digital well-being? It's basically the quality of your relationship with technology, how you balance your real life with your online life, whether you have control over the time you spend using technology. And in this article, I addressed how we as designers uh, can be mindful of how we design so that we do not create addictive technology, or we align with our users' goals and help them manage their time. um, a lot of my content today is derived from this article, but instead of focusing on what designers can do, I'm going to focus on what we as tech users can do to kind of prevent ourselves from getting addicted to technology. And a lot of my content is a mix of the research I did while writing this article, as well as my personal experiences. And I really hope that you find it useful. So, why unplug? We're all aware of the harmful effects of technology overuse, but I would still like to go over some of them. Technology overuse has been linked to problems such as eye strain, sleep problems, poor posture. It leads to reduced physical activity that could lead to heart diseases, obesity, and it has been linked to psychological issues such as anxiety and isolation. And of course, we all know that many of us are very unhappy with the way we are spending so much time on technology, because it makes us feel like we have lost control over ourselves and our time. So, what gets us hooked? What exactly is it about this technology that makes it so difficult for us to stop using them? There are many principles that come into play, but for today, I'm going to focus on this one framework, which is very popular and is used by many companies to create habit forming products. It's called the hook model, and it was created by the behavioral economist Neer Eyal. This framework consists of 4 phases, and I will talk about each of these phases in detail in the next couple of slides. The first phase is the trigger. So, the trigger is the foundation on which your habit is formed. It's basically a cue that prompts you to take some action. Now, a trigger can be either internal or external. So, internal could be your emotions like boredom, loneliness, the fear of missing out. Or it could be external, for example, a notification indicating that you have unread messages. The next phase is action. So, when your trigger is motivating enough and you have the ability to respond, you perform an action. And how social media and entertainment apps operate is that they create very accessible actions so that you do not have to take too much effort. To give you an example, if you see in YouTube, the recommended videos are just below the video you're currently watching. So you do not even have to search for the next video. You just have to tap, and if your autoplay is enabled, you just have to do nothing, and it just plays the next video. So your actions are really very accessible. The third and the most interesting phase is reward. All of these apps, they reward you every time you perform an action, and that is the main reason why we find ourselves visiting these apps again and again. Um, there are many interesting things that come into play here. For example, when you pull to refresh, there's a slight pause before your news feed gets populated with the latest posts, and that creates anticipation. But what's even more interesting is that your reward is unpredictable. When you pull to refresh, you do not know what's going to turn up, right? Because it could be a new picture or it could be nothing. So there's a lot of variability and unpredictability. Research has shown that when you're anticipating a reward, there's a surge in the level of dopamine in your brain, and this effect just multiplies when the reward is very variable and unpredictable. And the final phase is investment, which is some kind of work that you put in, which increases the likelihood of you returning to the app again. It could be something like data or time or anything that you put in. To give an example, Snapchat has streaks. So, when you've already spent the past 500 days snapping your best friend daily, why would you want to break that streak, right? You want to maintain that. So, you find yourself opening Snapchat and snapping your friend every day. Um, Now, the reason why I shared this model is not to villainize social media or any of these companies, but I think it's really interesting to see some of the thought processes that go behind the development of these applications. They also help us understand our own behaviors, and therefore they could provide some clues on how we can try to break away from this cycle. So, what are some strategies we can use to unplug from this addictive technology? First, begin by understanding. My reason for using social media and my behaviors may not be the same as yours. And the first step to fixing anything is to first understand what exactly your problem areas are. It's great that digital well-being has become very popular in these times, and so both iOS and Android provide you these tools where they show you which apps you use most frequently, how many times you unlocked your phone, at what time you use your phone most often, and things like that. And these can give you a very good understanding of what your problem areas are. Secondly, and more importantly, you need to identify your triggers. What is it that made you reach out to your phone the last time? In my case, my problem area was notifications. So I could be completely focused on my work, but one tiny beep from my phone, and I'd find myself unlocking, and then one thing would lead to another. And the next thing I knew, I had watched cat videos for 20 minutes. But in your case, it may be something different. Maybe it's some emotion. Are you bored? Is it the fear of missing out? So the next time when you find yourself, when you feel the urge to look at your phone, just take a pause and try to name that emotion. And identifying your trigger will help you decide what's the best strategy to employ to stop wasting your time on social media. Now that you know what your triggers are, you can plan for them. And being prepared to face your triggers is part of overcoming them. One thing I have found is that it's very helpful to redirect to a different activity based on what that emotion is. So, for example, if you think that you open social media because you're bored, think of an activity that could also help you get out of boredom and keep that activity accessible. So, if you think reading helps, then keep some books very handy so that the next time you find yourself reaching out to your phone, it's just as easy to reach out to a book instead. And so you save some time doing something that's not technology oriented. Use technology to combat technology. I know that sounds pretty counterintuitive, but remember that technology is not the villain. Social media is not the villain. It's just that you should learn how to control your impulses and use some of the apps and features to combat technology. So for the next few strategies, I'm going to talk about how you can use certain apps or certain features in apps to help you reduce your technology overuse. Um, for ease of explaining, I have categorized the next set of strategies into three groups: obstruct, restrict, and reward. And I will explain each of these in detail very soon. You may find that any one of these groups works best for you, or it could be a mix of tips from any of these groups. Um, so, what I recommend is to really understand your trigger and try out a couple of these tips that resonate with you, and try to find the right mix of things that work best for you. Strategy one is obstruct. So, what this means is that you try to create some barriers that prevent you from getting distracted by technology, or by staying or from staying distracted by technology. One example is disabling notifications. So, when you monitor your technology usage, you may find that there are certain apps that send you too many notifications, or you may realize that there are certain groups or certain people from whom you receive a lot of notifications that lead to um, all your distractions. So one way to deal with that is to disable or to mute your notifications while you work, and you will see that there are fewer triggers to tempt you to look at your phone. Secondly, explore your app settings. You will find in many apps that there are certain settings that you can use to create barriers. For example, the autoplay disable toggle that you see on YouTube. So when you disable it, the next video does not play, and so you would have to either scroll or search for another video to watch. And though that seems like very less effort, you may find that you do not want to take that much effort, and you find yourself quitting the app earlier than usual. Switch your phone to grayscale. This is a very interesting way which has worked really well for some people that I know. So what this does is it makes your phone less fun to use, because this makes the content, the app icons, the notifications less visually appealing, and therefore, even if you do unlock your phone to check the time, these icons may not look appealing enough for you to click on them and explore, and therefore you are creating a barrier. The next set of strategies is restrict, which means you are creating restrictions or limitations for using technology. One example is setting time limits on certain app types, and this is a feature you will find on your iPhone, or and also on most Android phones, where you can set time limits. For example, social media apps. Another very useful technique is time blocking. So, time blocking is a time management technique where you divide your whole day into time blocks, and you assign a very specific task to each time block, and you have to force yourself to perform only that task during a certain time. So, how this can help in restricting is you can have a time block dedicated especially for your distractions. So, for example, if you're working, you know that you have a Facebook time block coming up in an hour, so you are less likely to be tempted to open Facebook during your work block, for example. And having screen free zones really help. This could be an area of your house like your kitchen or your dining table, where you set a very strict rule that you have to leave your device outside before you enter that zone. This really helps you get some time and some zones away from technology throughout your day. The third strategy is reward or punish. Some of us may benefit from an additional push or added motivation to help you stick to your unplugging goals. There are many apps that let you do this, but I've picked a few based on the reviews I found. For rewarding, one app is Forest, which kind of plants a virtual tree when you open the app, and the tree grows while that app stays open. But the second you leave the app or open something else, the tree is killed. And this kind of interaction could really help you stay motivated. Another example is the Milk app. This is a game-like interface that gives you challenges, so you can compete with your family to see who can score more points by staying away from their phone for the longest. And this game could really keep you motivated enough and help you stay away from your phone. Um, and if you think you might benefit more by including some punishment, the Beeminder app actually charges you if you do not stick to your goals. And I think losing money is probably a very effective motivator. Of course, I have not used any of these apps, but they really have glowing reviews from people who have used it specifically for reducing their technology use. Uh, and moving on to my final section, that is unplugging from work. We all know that it has been really difficult for us working from home, because now there is no distinction between our personal lives and our work lives. It can be difficult to take enough breaks throughout the day, and also it can be very difficult to unplug from work at the end of the day. And I'm going to talk about both. First, the Pomodoro technique, and this is very popular. I'm sure many of you know about it already. But this technique helps you get enough breaks throughout your day. And I have found that this is very helpful, especially on days when you have fewer meetings and you have more hands on work, like writing or coding for a long period of time. Um, so, how this works is that you work in 25-minute shifts, and you force yourself to take a 5-minute short break at the end of every 25-minute shift. And after four such cycles, you take a longer break of 20 to 30 minutes. And ideally, during that break, you do some exercises, you get something to eat, uh, but this is a great way of ensuring that you take enough breaks while you're working. And I have found that when I use this technique, I feel much less overwhelmed, and I manage to do quite a bit of work even if I'm taking so many breaks. And on this slide, you will find a few tools which are basically Pomodoro timers that make it much easier for you to follow this technique. Time blocking. I know I mentioned this a while ago, and I mentioned that you can have specific time blocks in your day to use social media, but there are many different ways you can use this. One example is having meeting free blocks. Zoom fatigue is real. It can be very exhausting to have so many meetings in a day, and I've heard from people who tried having meeting free days, at least one meeting free day in a week. I think that can be pretty challenging, especially if you work in an agile environment where you have to have your daily stand up calls, your daily status calls. So instead of having a meeting free day, I think having a meeting free block would be just as useful, where you have a strict say 2 or 3 hour block during the day where you only focus on work and you do not have any meetings. Of course, when you work in a team, you will need your team support. So you could talk to your team members and try to get them on board and try to coordinate your meeting free block so that all of you can have that time to focus on doing something more productive. Secondly, block time for hobbies. That sounds like that's a very simple recommendation, but trust me, that makes a huge difference. It helps you stay calm and focused during the rest of your week. I recommend blocking 2 or 3 hours per week for your hobbies. And finally, have an after hours office block. We all receive email notifications from work until the time we go to bed nowadays. So it can be really difficult to have your free time without having to worry about work. And what I think helps is having an after hours office block. And let me explain with an example. So if your work officially ends at 5 p.m., you can have an after hours office block at 7 p.m. So from 5 to 7, you keep your work devices off, you keep your work related applications off, and you you will be less worried because you know that you will be looking at your work related notifications later. So from 5 to 7 you enjoy your personal time, and then at 7 you just go online for a bit, check your notifications, respond to anything that requires immediate attention. I feel that this is a much better way of dealing with after hours office rather than having to worry about your work all the time after 5 till you go to bed. And finally, demarcate. So it's very important to have a strong distinction between your personal life and your professional life. And though it seems very obvious, it's very important to have a separate office space. Try to avoid working where you eat or where you rest, because that distinction between your workspace and your personal space is very important. And secondly, have an end of work ritual. Uh, Previously, we used to commute from work to home, and that served as a very good transition. But now that that's gone, you will need to find a better way to signal to your brain that your work has officially ended. And one way you can do that is by having an end of work ritual. You could try walking on a familiar path, therefore, you're creating a kind of fake commute. Or you could listen to a specific kind of music, or you could light scented candles. But essentially, you're using auditory and visual cues to signal to your brain that you have finished your work and you are transitioning to your personal life, and that really helps. So, to summarize, here are some of the key points from my session today. And I'd like to reiterate that something that worked well for me may not work for you. So, it's important to make note of some of these strategies that resonated with you, really understand your triggers, and try to map your triggers with these strategies. Try a couple of different combinations and see what works best for you. I hope you found these tips useful and interesting. And yeah, before I open up for Q&A, I'd like to thank the Office of Alumni and Family Engagement for giving me this wonderful opportunity to speak, and also my folks at the UXC for publishing my blog and for being so supportive. Um, Thank you. I will now try to answer any questions that you may have.
Oh, you're very welcome, Prithvi. We love having our current students and alumni participate on these programs. And I certainly learned a few things from your presentation because I know that I need to find some ways to disconnect as well. And having recently moved my desk from the dining room table, that has been a huge improvement, and physically turning off my monitor. So but I learned some other ones too. And we do have some live questions. So the first question I'll ask is about your technology, fighting technology. What was the app that has the tree grow to signify you working and not checking your phone? Can you remind us of that one?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? The
The
app?
app that you mentioned that has the tree grow to signify your commitment to not checking your phone?
Yeah, it's called the Forest app. It's a productivity app. So basically, the intention is to have the tree growing while you work. So a good way to use that is also to have the tree growing while you do not look at your phone or your work. So yeah, it can be really helpful, and it's really it's very engaging, and you kind of like watching the tree grow and knowing that the tree is growing as you are meeting your goals. So I really recommend that app.
Excellent. Thank you. All right, so here's a question that you can probably be familiar with since your work is looking at apps and technology. Any advice to unplug when your job is attached to social media and you're expected to always reply or deal with work-related social media?
Oh, that's a tough one, and that's a great question. I'm sure it can be very challenging. But I hope the after hours office block technique that I mentioned would be useful here. And I know it's very easy for someone to say, try to work only from 9 to 5, especially if you work in technology. But it's very important to enforce that distinction from your personal life and your professional life. So try to have a hard stop at 5 and then have another block a few hours later, so you still get that 2 hours of personal time before you look at your work related notifications again. And I'm sure, given that we are all in the same situation, all of us now understand the importance of unplugging, and so your colleagues may be more open to the idea of you having some time away from work and know that you will be back a while later.
Yeah, that blocking technique is really great.
It's a
Um,
very powerful tool.
yeah, I found that with checking emails, sometimes if you just dedicate 20 minutes and you're just going to work on clearing your inbox, that can feel very productive.
Yeah.
Another question we have from our audience is what have of those that you presented, what have you personally found to be most effective for your triggers?
Yeah. So, like I mentioned, my major triggers were notifications, and it's very clear to me that that was my most important trigger, because ever since I disabled my notifications, my technology use has gone down by 20 minutes a day, which sounds less, but I think that's a big change from almost 2 hours to 1.5 hour or so. So that's my favorite one. I personally believe that creating obstructions and trying to create uh, as many barriers as you can, such as disabling notifications, converting your phone to grayscale is another great way to do it. So these are my personal favorites.
Those are good recommendations. I know for me too, charging my phone in a separate room
Mhm.
that that I don't walk through all the time can be helpful. All right. Another question is about how do you suggest having a separate office space when you live in a space that only allows a desk in your bedroom? How to create a real separation when you can see your bed from your desk? Oh, that's challenging. Any suggestions?
Yeah, that's challenging. That's a good question. And I face the same issue. Um, I do not think you need to have a very physical separation of your workspace from your personal space, but you can use certain things that kind of create a clear distinction. For example, keep work related stuff on your table, and make sure you do not take your laptop away from your table to your bed. So you're creating this kind of mental division, this kind of mental barrier between your workspace and your personal space. I think that could help.
Excellent. All right, we'll ask one more question here we have. Um, Especially during COVID times where we depend on social media to stay connected with others, what might be some other ways to keep up with friends?
Hmm, that's interesting. um, I think also it's important to note that it's not bad to use social media, especially if you're connecting with your friends and family. I think that's one of the core benefits of having social media. So as long as you don't feel like you are wasting unwanted time that you could have spent doing something productive or healthy, doing something that you don't want to do, I think it's fine. Um, yeah, so what are other ways to connect? I guess you could have dedicated Zoom meetings for with your family, just for to reconnect if you don't want to go on social media, or you can go back to having audio calls, which seem to be a thing of the past. But I think those are also a great way to connect.
I think more people are enjoying talking by phone than Zoom sometimes these days. It's a nice way to change it up from all the work calls, right? As we present to all of you via Zoom. So we thank you for not disconnecting completely. All right, well, this has been so wonderful. Thank you all for joining us today. Prithvi, any last words of wisdom from your experience?
Thank you so much for joining. I really hope you found this interesting. And if you have any feedback or any more questions, or you'd like to connect, please feel free to send me an email or add me on LinkedIn. And I'm very happy to respond and work with you.
Thank you so much. We'll be including Prithvi's email in our follow-up email. So again, definitely keep an eye on your inboxes. We so appreciate you all for joining us and spending some time with us this afternoon. And we hope you go out, unplug, and be productive. Have a great day.